Well, good evening. It's good to see you tonight. We'll go ahead and get started. If it seems like we're spread out more, we are, because Ben said he's not going to get caught again like he got caught Sunday with all of the people here and not enough space. So he texted me this afternoon and said, "Hey, I've added rows everywhere." So, but it's good to see you. And you know what? We enjoyed the Baptist Burb tonight. I ordered this chicken on Monday, paid for this chicken on Monday. Told them I would pick it up at 4:15 today because we eat at 5:15. I got there at 4. And they said, it's coming. We have 900 pieces of chicken to get ready. I ordered 175. We have 900 pieces of chicken to get ready. And I thought she was exaggerating, you know. No. Journey Church, Baptist Church. Salem Heights, Baptist Church. Hebron Baptist Church. Highland Baptist Church. And some Methodist Faith Community Church. They all had chicken tonight. And one of them had 300 pieces. And so anyway, for those of you that were waiting, I'm sorry. For those of you that may have got on the tail end, we're also sorry. We just don't know. We don't know how much to do. And so we'll get it figured out hopefully before long. So well, let me share some announcements with you, and then I'll share a prayer request with you. I know that you probably have many prayer requests. I also know that we'll spend some time together praying at the end, and you can share those in a little bit more of an intimate setting. As far as announcements go, yes, we had a great time Sunday. We had a great time, and if you read my email this morning, I did. I apologized to our staff Sunday evening. I said, guys, I just totally didn't expect God to do what God did Sunday. This is the truth. We have averaged about 210 since the first of the year on Sunday mornings. That includes this room, but that goes back to January. In this room, we only dropped off about 2 or 3 through the summer, which is another blessing because usually there's a summer slump, and hey, we're in a gym. And I had a pastor come up to me last night, and they are also in a building program, and he said, I said, how's it going? He says, it's going well. I see you guys got through. And I said, we did. And I said, well, what about you guys? He says, I'm ready to get out of the gym. And so, I got it. So we've been averaging about 210 on Sunday. And you know what? We have a big God. And so, well, bigger than your God apparently is bigger than ours, because we had 210. We prepared for 275. Because we have a big God. And we had 440 people here Sunday. So I got a text from Ben at the end of the service. All it said was 440, period, ordering more chicken. And I said, well, what did he order? 440 pieces of chicken? Because I know there's not 440 people here. And I thought maybe he just jumped it to 440 pieces of chicken. No, it was not that. So anyway, hey, we learned our lesson, and it was a great time together, great fellowship together, and it was a great day, great morning service. We got it. We survived it. Thank you for your patience and all those things. Speaking of patience, we know that there's sound issues. We know that there are issues. We know that there are issues with those cups. There was juice on people's shirts. There was juice on some seats. It wiped right off. All right. We checked that Monday morning, and it's clean, okay? We knew that. It's 25 years. We got it. So we know that, so we're going to try to be more understanding and help you walk through that a little bit better Sunday morning. Anyway, so great time. So we got through that. Sunday night, we got it. We got 30 chairs in the choir room. 30. Ben added a few more, but we didn't have 47, 49, whatever it was. Okay, learned our lesson there. We're going to eat in here. We cleaned up Sunday morning at lunch. Most everybody had left. Hey, Brother Eric, Stacy said, well, you want me to pull these tablecloths off or just wipe them down for tonight? Just wipe them down for tonight. We'll meet in here. It's nice and comfortable. No, let's meet over there. It's so much more centrally located. It'll be just that much better. 150 people pile up in that room, and they don't fit in that room. And so thank you for your patience there. And but you know what? God just does what God does, and we're grateful for that. And it was a great time together Sunday evening, all day. It's a good day. So we're going to try it again this Sunday. All right, we're going to learn our lessons. We're going to try again this Sunday. We're going to worship the Lord. I hope that you'll be here. I hope you'll invite someone to be here. Sunday evening, we're going to be a little bit different. We are having choir at 4:15. At 5:30, rather than have a meal and you guys bring food, we're going to provide cake and punch, and we're going to have a reception for Dave and Lou Ann. Assuming, I'm glad they're here tonight. I thought Sunday morning after I totally disrespected them and didn't introduce them that they would leave. And so we're going to have a reception for them. It's a gift card and money tree reception, okay? We're going to let them buy what they want to buy. So if you guys can be here at 5:30, we're going to try to fix the flow. We're going to use the senior adult wing, and we'll have them in a room where you can come through and say hi. You can leave that room and grab you some punch, fellowship together, and then we will have our small groups. Hopefully we'll start on time at 6 o'clock this Sunday night. So that's our plan for this week, and I hope that you'll make plans to join us all day. It'll be a good day together. Okay? Ben, what else? Okay, that's it. This is probably TMI, but Maria and I scheduled a vacation for September 29th, next Thursday, through October the 6th, the next Thursday. Thursday to Thursday. I'm going to be out on October the 2nd. Brother Dave's going to preach. You are in great hands. I'm thankful for him being able to do that. Brother Al is going to handle Wednesday, October the 5th, and you're going to be in great hands, and I'm thankful for that. We found out in the spring through a friend that we had that there's a man from New York who owns a home in the Dominican Republic that he uses as an Airbnb on the ocean. We've never been to this part of the island in the north, and I said, that's not true. There's no way. Oh, they said he lets pastors come stay for free. No way. Emailed him in the summer. Absolutely. He said, I'm a pastor's kid. We've done a lot of mission work on the island. I'd love to have you guys if you want to come. Okay? September 29th, October 6th. Sunday night, I texted him. He lives in New York. Or I emailed him. I said, hey, man, I'm praying for the hurricane. We've got friends all over the island. We're praying as well that the Lord would be gracious and spare things. And he says, we'll keep you updated. Well, yesterday at lunch, the house is significantly damaged, and we're not going to be able to go, which is okay. We may go to Collins for our vacation. We'll see how that goes. No offense to Collins, but we're working on that. We're going to go somewhere. I have not had a Sunday off since Halloween last year when 6,000 people showed up to hear Cody preach. I know. Cody's family showed up in mass, and that was the biggest crowd we'd had since Cody'd been here and I'd been here. That's the last Sunday I took off for vacation. You're probably saying, that's not true, Brother Eric. I have had a surgery, and I've had conferences, and we've had mission trips, but not just to relax. And so, and that's okay. Well, that's not okay. I shouldn't have let that happen. So we're going to take off, and so pray for us, and we're going to rest, and it'll be fine. I say that to say, I started getting word from my friend Wilford, the man who's been here, our missionary in the Dominican. Hey, how's it going? Well, they're in the capital. They're centrally located, and things are fine. Very wet, a lot of rain, a lot of flooding. But beginning around La Romana, which is to the east where we've worked before, all the way up to Punta Cana, where some of you vacationed and been there, some of you got married there, all the way up there, there's a strip, which also went across to the north, that really pounded them. And I got some pictures on Tuesday from our friend that's in the sugarcane fields. I got pictures today from another church that Maria went to this summer, a new church, a new plant in Higüey, which is outside of La Romana. And they've had some trouble. The pastor at this new church, palm tree came through his home, almost killed his daughter. But they're okay, and the Lord was with them. So we are working on sending help if we can through Rain Down. We're working on getting some help. I told them I'm praying with them as they minister to their communities. These pastors are able to minister in the difficult times and difficult situations. So you can pray for our brothers and sisters in the Dominican Republic as well. Also, and then I will move on. Thanksgiving week, a Monday morning of Thanksgiving week, Marie and I will fly, the Lord willing, we'll fly to the Dominican. I will do a conference on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, and we will fly home on Friday. So you can pray as those things come together. One of the things that has to come together, we were going to meet in these locations, and so we're praying that there's a place, and that they're back to somewhat normal life, and none of them have electricity, of course, but that's coming up. Won't miss anything on campus here. We're not having anything Thanksgiving week after Sunday, and so but pray for that as we prepare to go and minister there. Okay, so I just wanted you to know these. For us, this hurricane wasn't coming our way, and so we kind of like, we can move on. Well, it didn't, and we're grateful for that, but it did affect people that we have invested in, and we have ministry to. So pray for them as they walk through this, okay? All right, I want to go to Nehemiah chapter 11 tonight. Nehemiah chapter 11. And I want to be in Nehemiah 11 and 12. On the heels of what's going on and what we had Sunday, on the heels of just thinking about what's next for Highland and where can we be about the business of the Lord's kingdom, and also understanding that I was going to be out in a couple of weeks and didn't want to start something new that would have to be interrupted. I just began thinking about a text that I've dealt with here, but many of you weren't here when I dealt with it. Nehemiah 11 and 12. We walked through the entire book of Nehemiah. Great study, great book about rebuilding the walls of churches, our lives, our families, the Lord's kingdom. And I am not going to read chapter 11 and chapter 12. Please don't get nervous about that. But I am going to reference it. If you will look at chapter 11 and 12, they're long. If I did read chapters 11 and 12, we wouldn't get through it because most of those words I can't pronounce, or nor can you, I'm assuming. So, but they're there for a reason. And so what I want to use is Nehemiah 11 and 12 as a challenge for you and me, a challenge for us as a church to consider what God would have us be about doing. Some of you have been here a long time. Some of you have not been here very long at all. Some of you are guests. The bottom line is where we are right now and what the Lord's doing and where the Lord would have us go and how the Lord would have us serve and be useful in His kingdom. And so, and 12 is that. If you let me just set the stage for where we are. I don't want to get bogged down in history, but it's important. So the children of Israel in captivity twice. First captivity we find early on in the book of end of Genesis, beginning of Exodus. Where are they in captivity? In Egypt, right? The Lord uses Moses to deliver them. Upon their deliverance, the Lord established them as a nation. They have King David, and then they have King Solomon. They are at the height of their glory, at the height of peace and security. But once Solomon goes, the kingdom goes. The kingdom ends up divided. The next thing we know, they are in captivity again. Where are they in captivity this time? In Babylon, all right? Interesting thing, we find that story at several places. We find it highlighted in the book of Daniel. In the middle of that captivity in Daniel 5, Daniel 6, Babylon was in charge, led by primarily King who? King Nebuchadnezzar, right? Chapter 5, chapter 6 of Daniel, we have, in the midst of a chapter, an incredible regime change. Literally, the Babylonian kingdom falls. What takes its place? The Persian Persian kingdom. King Darius, we find mentioned in Daniel chapter 6. King Xerxes. These guys, their attitude towards Israel is, look, you guys can go. We've got enough to deal with. You guys can go. And he sends them home. They go home in shifts. We find Ezra and Nehemiah as the return home. Ezra and Nehemiah, if you study your scriptures, study history of the scriptures, they were one book in the original Hebrew Bible. They were one book because they were one story. Ezra leads a group back to rebuild the what? The temple. All right, so Ezra leads a group back to rebuild the temple. Not a big group. Takes a small number of folks. They rebuild the temple. Then we get to Nehemiah. Now they need a large number of people to go back to rebuild the wall. Because we now have a temple, but we don't have a city in which we can live and feel secure and worship. And so they go back to build the walls of the city of Jerusalem. Interesting thing. Even though they've been released, not everybody wants to go home. As a matter of fact, what happened was, while they were in captivity in Babylon, the Hebrew men thought those Babylonian women were pretty cute. And those Hebrew women thought those Babylonian men were pretty cute. And in defiance of what the Lord had commanded from the very beginning, what did they do? They intermarried. Why had God told them not to do that? Was it racial? Negative. And that should flow off of your tongue really quickly. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with their worship. They worshiped multiple false gods. And God said, don't do that. It will bring you down. So when it comes time to go home, Nehemiah says, hey, we want to come home. They don't all go home. Some stayed behind because they enjoyed where they were living. When we get to the New Testament, they are a group of people known as Samaritans. And that's why we see them play this prominent role in the life of Jesus and the life of the Pharisees because, for instance, Jesus tells a story of a man who's a hero of the story who is a good what? Wait a second, a Samaritan can't be good. We don't like those people. They are half-breeds. They're not part of us. By the way, there's a thread throughout the entire Bible where God, and Jesus particularly in this case, points out that the kingdom of God is not just for our Jews. It's for all people, and all God's people here said, amen, right? And so that group of people stays behind. Nehemiah calls a group of people home. And they've got a job to do. And what we find in Nehemiah chapter 11 and Nehemiah chapter 12, I'm rushing through this, you probably don't think so, but we find a group of people who made a commitment, we're going home. And we're going to be about what God's called us to do. A people of commitment. So folks, I just want to share this with you as a family of the Lord here at Highland. We must decide, hey, we're committed to what God's doing here. Whatever it is, we're committed to doing it. And so I just want you to know this. I shared this Sunday morning. I don't think that any of us are here by accident. God has brought the people that He's brought here in this room. As I said, some of you have been here a while. Some of you are new. Some of you are thinking about it. I think God has us here for a purpose, and He wants to accomplish that purpose through us. But we have to decide that we're a part of that. And this is what we find in chapters 11 and 12. Let me just give you this outline. And here's the question at the top. Because these folks we're going to find in 11 and 12, they had to make a call. Their commitment involved leaving their comfort zones. How many of you like comfort zones? I do. Right? I just kind of like them. But how many of you know that there are times where God says, hey, I need you out of that comfort zone? And this is where we find them. Are we willing to do that? We must be a people of commitment. How do we do it? Let me just share this with you from this text tonight. Number one, we must give ourselves to God. We must give ourselves to God. As we look at chapter 11 and chapter 12, there is list after list after list after list of families, of groups, of individual people who made a commitment that they were going to go home. But were they going to go home just to go and sit? No, they were going to go home for a purpose. Listen to me, Church Highland. God's got us here for a purpose. It's never to sit. It's never to be comfortable. It's always to be about whatever it is He's called us to be and to do. And part of the journey as a pastor and leadership here, and I believe the Lord speaks through you, hey, where can we be about that business? And so they committed themselves, they gave themselves to God. They knew that God had brought them home for a purpose. And let me just say this, to fail to serve is to miss God's purpose. I don't think that's on your sheet, but to fail to serve is to miss God's purpose. What did they do? What does it involve when we give ourselves to God? Letter A, it involves moving out of our comfort zones. Moving out of our comfort zones. You know, you and I may say, well, yeah, but Brother Eric, they were in captivity. They had it at that point, as I said, the Persians really weren't real concerned about it. They had gotten really comfortable. And so for them to return to Jerusalem, you see that on those bullet points there? Returning to Jerusalem meant a few things for them. Number one, they had to reorder their view of material things. Reordering their view of material things. They had to walk away of a land that they may not have owned it, but they were over it. A land that they had plowed, a land where they had lived, a land where they had harvested crops and planted crops, and now they had to move to a city. And by the way, do you know what was in the city that they were moving to? A bunch of rocks. It had all been destroyed. And so their idea and their view of material things had to say, hey, this doesn't matter. And so it doesn't matter if we meet in the gym. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Those things are not important. We're here to serve. They had to rearrange, secondly, their social priorities. They had to walk away from neighbors, walk away from family and friends in their old villages. It was a difficult experience. And for some of you, as a matter of fact, I'd say for most of us, coming to a church family many times involves forming new relationships and leaving some comfortable relationships that we had. But there is a sense in which God's brought me here, right? Thirdly, to live in Jerusalem meant that you had to realize that you were a target. You were a target for the enemy. You're a target for the enemy. Listen, when you're about the purpose that God wants you to do, hear me, Satan picks up the pace. And some of you are here in this room today, and you've made a decision that I'm going to be a part at Highland. Maybe I'm new at Highland. Maybe I'm renewing a commitment at Highland. Maybe I've dedicated my life to the Lord. Let me just tell you, it picks up. Satan's working. And he will bring things in your life. And he'll do everything he can to knock you down. I've shared this before because even a while ago when I announced that Maria and I are going to go do this conference in November, we began in 2015 doing this. And it wasn't until a few years into this that we made the correlation that every single time that we announce and make plans for our mission work, Satan goes nuts in our home. Nuts. And we just kind of got to the place where we know what? We'll see what happens. But we have to go. So I want to tell you, church family, if you're going to commit to be a part of what God's doing here, Satan's going to work. He always does. And we're going to see in just a moment how he did that in the life of these people. So Nehemiah, look at this. I love this in 11 and 12. Nehemiah, through the ministry of the Holy Spirit, listed these people by name who got out of their comfort zone. They got out of their comfort zone. And when you and I read these verses, I mean, who is, in verse 12 of chapter 11, who is Malchijah? I don't know. Those names are not important to me, but they are important to God. And there are countless people in this room and in the history of this church family who are giving themselves to the Lord, and down the road, no one may know who you are, but you're important to the Lord. You're out of your comfort zone. God, whatever it takes, I want to do it. Right? Secondly, they moved out of their comfort zone, and then they mobilized for ministry. They mobilized for ministry. Where am I getting that from? Well, what we find is that they began to cast lots. Hey, we want volunteers to come to Jerusalem, but if you're not going to volunteer, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be drafted. And they had this system by which you find in the Old Testament a lot where they cast lots. We don't do that now. They use that as a way in which they discovered the will of God. Can I remind you, why was that necessary? They didn't have the Holy Spirit indwelling them. They didn't have the Word of God by which they could consult. So those two things you and I have, right? We have the Word of God, we have the indwelling Spirit of the Lord, and the Lord uses those things and people in our lives to give us direction. They didn't have that. And so they would cast lots. And you can read some different types that they do. And so in other words, this is what happened. It was kind of like a lottery. And if the lot fell to you, guess where you're going? You're going with us to Jerusalem. Pack up. It was better, by the way, to be a volunteer. But they moved. And they didn't, as I said earlier, they didn't just go to see it, they went to work. Can you imagine that person whom the lot fell to them? Hey, you're going with us. And we're going to go work for the Lord over here in Jerusalem. You ever told God your plans? If you want to make God laugh, tell God your plans. Right, Hooks? Right, Estes? You know what? Eric's plan, Eric married late. Nobody would take Eric. Part of that had to do with Eric's not marrying a Hispanic. Eric's not marrying someone that has a child. And I'm not doing that. God's like, yeah, you are. Right? And countless testimonies in this room, right? God, I'm not doing that. Or God, I've got plans to do this. Yeah. And he pulls us out of our comfort zone, doesn't he? And he says, go. Go work. Look at I'm not going to read all this. There's so many different people that gave themselves. In chapter 11, chapter 12, let me list some of the types of people that gave themselves to the ministry. There were the people of Judah and Benjamin, chapter 11, verse 4 through 9. There were priests, there were Levites, there were temple workers, there were maintenance workers, there were ministers of prayer and praise, there were guardians of the temple. They had to guard the tithes and the offerings. Hey, protect it. There were other ministers. There are various types of people throughout chapter 11 and 12. We find all walks of life. We also find in chapter 11 and 12, we find a variety of jobs. They served inside the temple. They served outside the temple. They were singers. They were workers. Here's my point in this. We all have a place in God's community. Some of you think, I don't have a place. What am I going to do? We all have a place. And I don't know where that is for you. My prayer is that you would be willing to allow the Lord to use you, and let's walk that direction. What can God use you to do? But there is a place. So here's my question for you under number 1, big bold letters, capital letters. What is God asking you to do? What is God asking you to do that may stretch you? Hey, Highland family, what's God asking you to do, and part of what God's doing here that may stretch you out of your comfort zone? I just tell you, we need some workers. Ben, did I blow that tonight? Where's that? Was I supposed to bring that? You didn't bring it because you gave it to me to bring. I knew it. Actually, no, I have it. I have it right here. We need help. I need help. We need help. We need help with kids, preschool kids, Sunday 10:30, Sunday at 6, Wednesday at 6. We need help with older kids, Sunday 10:30, Sunday at 6, Wednesday at 6. Now look, if you hate kids, please don't sign up. All right? But God may be stretching you and say, you know what, I can do that. I can do that. We'll help you. There are multitudes of places that the Lord can use you. Countless ways. Where is God asking you to be a part that will stretch you? All right? Secondly, being a people of commitment. We give ourselves to God. Here I am, Lord. But then secondly, in chapter 12, we're going to hone in on some actual verses this time. In chapter 12, we must give our praise to God. So we give ourselves to God, and then we give our praise to God. And beginning in chapter 12 and verse 27. Interesting, if you'll look at that. Chapter 12, verse 27, at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places. Who were the Levites? Temple workers, okay? Temple workers. They weren't the priest. They worked in the temple. The priests were from where? The line of who? Aaron. The Levites were they were workers in the temple, did many different jobs. So, at the direction of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgiving, and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the districts surrounding Jerusalem and from the villages of the Netophathites. All right? And that's where we're going to skip some stuff. Look at verse 31. And then I brought the leaders of Judah up onto the wall, Nehemiah says. He brought the leaders up onto the wall and appointed two great what? Choirs that gave thanks. Wait a second, a choir gets up on the wall? Yeah. Most scholars believe, most archaeologists believe that these walls were so thick, at least one chariot could ride it that way, and in some instances, two chariots could pass along a wall. So plenty of room for a choir. So one choir, I brought the leaders, one choir, in the end of verse 31, one choir went to the south on the wall to the dung gate. Aren't you glad you weren't in that group? Verse 38, the other choir of those who gave thanks went to the north, and I followed with them, half of the people on the wall above the tower of the ovens to the broad wall. So what you see is Nehemiah moving these folks from just showing up, moving these folks from just working, but watch this, they were moving from being workers to being worshipers. Can I tell you something? It is no good to have a beautiful place like this room, no good to have a beautiful sanctuary over there if all we're doing is gathering and we're not worshiping. And we're not consecrated and committed to this Lord. Otherwise, we're just showing up. And so Nehemiah knew that. Dedicated walls and dedicated gates without dedicated people are useless. So watch this. We do worship with our presence. We also worship, obviously, with our praise. And so what we find, and I just want to summarize what we find here in these passages all the way down to verse 42. Number one, there was a parade of joyful hearts that magnified God. A parade of joyful hearts that magnified God. And so can I share this with you? It's not just that we worship. Watch this. It's how we worship. We've talked about this as we concluded the Psalms of Ascent. If you would look back, and I'm not going to point to the specific ones, you can read them on your own. From verses 27 through 42, several words were used to describe the hearts of the people. Joyful praise, Singing is described 8 times. Thanksgiving is described 6 times. Rejoicing 7 times. Musical instruments 3 times. He talks about cymbals. He talks about harps and lyres. He talks about trumpets. And then he describes their attitude in their praise. In chapter 12, he describes it as thankfully, joyfully, loudly, accompanied by various instruments. And who was doing the praise? Yes, there were professional musicians. But he also describes in verse 43, women and children. Point being, what is that? Hey, we're not just here to spectate. We're all here to worship. And so this giving of themselves, their joyful hearts magnifying God. And then, letter B, there was a purification of clean hearts that honored God. Purification of clean hearts that honored God. Verse 30, the priest and the Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people and the gates and the wall. And so, church, here's the deal. You and I can't give ourselves properly in worship until we have gotten ourselves right before the Lord. And really before each other. And I just want to warn you, just red flag, red flag, red flag. We're about to walk through some things on Sunday morning and Sunday nights that are going to hit all of us right in the mouth. Hey, are we loving each other like we should? Are we encouraging one another? Are we forgiving one another? Are we bearing with one another? Are we right? Are we right with the Lord? Are we right with ourselves? Because we can gather all we want and we can call it worship, but until we're right with God and right with our brothers and sisters, we're never going to be effective. And so the quote that I gave you there, God only uses clean vessels to the maximum. Will God use you? Yep. Hey, God uses all kinds of people. God is a great reminder that in the Old Testament, God spoke through a donkey. He can use whatever He wants to use. He can use you and your bad attitude. But He only uses clean vessels to the maximum. You and I will never be what God's called us to be until we're clean before Him and before our brothers and sisters. And so they purified themselves, honoring God. Thirdly, there was a prayer of believing hearts, let her see, that trusted God. A prayer of believing hearts that trusted God. So this procession that we just read about was divided into 2 groups. Ezra headed south with a group, while Nehemiah headed north with a group. And they met at the temple and they held a worship service. And so what we discover in this is they weren't just dedicating the temple, they were dedicating the entire work. And they were bearing witness. They were bearing witness to the greatness of their God. If you would go back and look, chapter 4, in those times where they were being harassed for the work that they were doing by Sanballat and Tobias and these others who were constantly harassing them, this is what they said. Hey guys, what are you doing? We're building a wall. We're building the wall around Jerusalem. A fox can knock over that wall. That's sorry work that you're doing. And so now that they've come to this spot, they're magnifying God, that God had done what God had done. And by the way, it tells us that the entire area knew it. And so, church, we've talked about this. This community, this city, this state, they know what's going on right here. I went to a banquet last night of my friend PJ and Rain Down Ministries, and we had close to 400 people there, and it was the fundraising banquet for this wonderful ministry that we're a part of, and tons of people there, and got to go and just run my mouth, and I'm good at that, and so, but people were coming up. Hey, we heard about what's going on. We heard about your sanctuary. We heard about Sunday. I don't know how they heard. We heard. But here's my question. What are they hearing? Are they hearing us brag and magnify what God's done? Or, as we've talked about, are they hearing us, and we talked about this Sunday, or are they hearing us button heads or questioning what God's doing? They listen. And so they were bearing witness to their God and claiming what God had done and stepping out in faith. So here's my question for you there under number 2. Have you set yourself apart? Have you set yourself apart for the Lord's special use? That question is this. Have I gotten myself right before the Lord? Lord, however you want to use me, I'm clear. Clear before you. I'm clear before my brothers and sisters. Use me, Lord. Lastly, we must give our gifts to God. Give our gifts to God, verses 43 through 47. And they offered great sacrifices that day in chapter 12 and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. And this is where we just got to talking about. The joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. I love that to be said of Highland. The joy of Highland was heard far away. But verse 44, on that day men were appointed over the storerooms, the contributions, the first fruits, the tithes, to gather them into the portions required by the law for the priest and the Levites. So the people were bringing their tithes. This is an overflow of worship. It's an overflow of being right with God. God, you deserve this. I want to give you what's yours. And so they consecrated themselves to give their gifts to God. And so here's the question. Why did they give? Do we just force people to give? And by the way, yeah, I'm talking about giving. And it's not just our stuff, but it's ourselves, but it's our stuff too. Why do we give? I had someone ask me this weekend, Brother Eric, if we come to Highland, are you guys going to require us to give a certain amount of money? Because we were involved at a church where they told us that we had not given appropriate amounts, and they needed to step it up. That's a good idea. No, we do keep, well, someone keeps up with, I don't know what you give. I have no idea what you give. No, that's not why we give. But I think we ought to be reminded to give. I found out, where's Miss Vicki? She's in here somewhere, isn't she? Miss Vicki, did she go? Oh, hey. Dr. Sewell, I heard every November he would speak on giving. And when he was pastor here. And you know, last November I did that, and because I felt like we all need to be reminded, and some of us are new to the faith and we don't understand hey, are you guys requiring us to, how do you do that? Not going to speak on a sermon series on that this year, but I am going to do this, and some of you may be tapped on the shoulder. We're praying through this, and we're going to work through this. Some of you may be tapped on the shoulder. I certainly want 3 generations, may go with 4 generations. I'm not sure how that'll break down, where we ask some of you to give some tithing testimonies of you and either you individually or you as a family, husband and wife, where you've said, hey, we want to be obedient in our giving. And the Lord has seen us through that in difficult times, and I want our church family to hear you talk about God's faithfulness through that. And so we'll do that and record that and show that maybe in some video testimonies. But why do we give? Well, the text tells us, verse 43 of chapter 12, God had given them great joy. God had given them great joy. It is my joy to give. God, you've blessed me. I want to be a blessing to you. And part of that touches my stuff and my not giving my life, but also my material things. Verse 44, it says that they gave because that God had blessed them with great leaders. God, you've blessed us with great leaders. We trust them, and we trust them to do what you've called them to do and to be about your work. Thirdly, God was worthy of their honor and their love. God was worthy of their honor and their love, and so they gave. Lord, you're worthy of that. It doesn't have anything to do with a percentage. It doesn't have anything to do with a requirement. It's just, God, you're worthy, and I give it. And so the last question there is, will you give in response to who God is and what He has done for you? Will you give in response to who God is and what He has done for you? Not talking about money necessarily. Will you give yourself in response to who God is and what He's done? So, folks, this is where I am not the prophet. I am not a prophet nor the son of a prophet. And as you can tell by my expectations this past Sunday, I really don't. I don't know that I'm necessarily always in tune with what God's doing. But I can tell you this. I truly believe this, and I don't know what that looks like. I'm not about numbers, and that's part of the thing Sunday morning. I wasn't thinking about numbers. I wanted us to honor the Lord and want it to be a great time of worship. But listen, I think God's about to do some great things. And woe to us if we don't commit ourselves to being all that He wants us to be. And getting out of the comfort zones and letting Him use us. I want us to spend some time together praying. Sonny, can you look to your left and take those to your left? Sammy, can you take those to your right here? And then I will let the rest of you kind of just divide up, maybe a third of the table. Spend some time praying. Mike, you got them right there. Wayne, you want to go down there with Miss Vicki? Y'all can come down here with Brother Ted, or you can pray amongst yourselves. Hey, do this. Two things. I love it. I say it just about weekly because introduce yourself if you need to. Number two, be mindful that some will pray longer than others. By the way, your groups, you may not want everyone in your group to pray because the preacher went long tonight. No, I'm not. I'm good. We got about 12 minutes, but we can take as long as we want. I'm just saying. Some of you may just have one person pray. Some of you may have a couple people pray. But go around. Maybe there are some things that you want to pray about as that you did not have an opportunity to mention or weren't comfortable mentioning publicly, that we can pray for you and with you